Good afternoon. My name is April Smith, and I'm the Education Coordinator at NAFA. Welcome to the Sustainable Fleet Technology webinar series. Before I turn things over to our speaker for today's sessions, there are a few housekeeping notes that we'll review. This session is being recorded, and a copy of that recording will be made available to you in the next few days. All participants are muted during the presentation to limit background noise, but we encourage you to ask questions and add comments using the Q&A features. You can find this on the Zoom toolbar. If you experience any technical difficulties, please reach out to NAFA through the chat feature. And now, to kick things off, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today.
Thank you, April. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Shelley Parker, a Senior Project Manager with the Transportation Team at the NC Clean Energy Technology Center. The center provides services to public entities, governments, businesses, utilities, and citizens relating to development and adoption of clean energy technologies, including the transportation sector. Through its programs and activities, we envision and seek to promote the development and use of clean energy in ways that stimulate a sustainable economy. We're proud to partner with NAFA, the world's largest membership association for individuals who manage vehicular fleets and mobility responsibilities, to expand access to this webinar series. We have some great panelists today to talk about hydrogen as a fuel in fleet use. Last fall, the Department of Energy office announced $7 billion from the bipartisan infrastructure law to go toward regional clean hydrogen hubs. Hydrogen is in the news almost daily, so we're here to review how the potential increase in production distribution across the U.S. provides more opportunities for cleaner fuel use in fleets, or as much as we can in 90 minutes. I'd like to thank our sponsors for making these webinars possible. The Clean Energy Technology Center collaborates with NAFA to produce these webinars, which would not be possible without the support of our sponsors. The Clean Energy Tech Center requires assistance in closing the gap between our funding and all of the programming we want to offer. We do this through some fee-for-service work, the Sustainable Fleet Technology Conference and Expo we hold each fall, and through the sponsors of the webinar series. Our sponsor partnerships are vital for continuing to provide educational opportunities. We truly appreciate the financial support of these organizations, many with whom we have longstanding partnerships. They're strong companies with good solutions. So if you need, please reach out. The Sustainable Fleet Technology webinars are informative sessions where industry experts analyze frequent challenges, demonstrate areas of potential operational and environmental improvement, and showcase strategies and technologies fleets are implementing to drive their sustainability goals. Registration is free for all SFT webinars. You can see the schedule for the remainder of the year, and you can watch our previous webinars online, including the hydrogen webinar from June 2023 in the webinar archives, even though there's been a lot of updates since then. If you're interested, you can also go ahead and register for our next two webinars. May 29th is focused on total cost of ownership. The panelists will go beyond evaluating the overall cost of owning and maintaining vehicles to review how you can evaluate the overall cost of charging and fueling infrastructure. And on June 20th, we'll review requirements for federal funding for EV charging infrastructure. We recognize it can feel like a maze of requirements from various agencies when applying for different sources of federal funding, and it can be confusing to tell the difference between Buy America and Build America. What qualifications are required for electricians installing the chargers, and if chargers need to be publicly accessible. So tune in if you want to learn more about those. Also, I hope that I have the opportunity to meet you in person at the Sustainable Fleet Technology Conference and Expo. It'll be in Durham, August 13th through 15th. Join 400 fleet-minded friends and colleagues in North Carolina. The early bird rate for attendees is only $349. The SFT Conference and Expo focuses on alternative fuel vehicles and equipment and infrastructure and planning, policy, and more. We'll have 12 breakout sessions across 3 tracks: advancing vehicle technologies, fueling and charging, and funding and planning. Pre-conference events on August 13th include sustainability training, safety training, and the NAFA Green Fleet Awards and reception. So I hope to see you all there. And now, let me introduce you to our speakers. We have some great speakers today with various specialties across the field of hydrogen, ranging from policy and regulation, major infrastructure projects, use in freight, the newest, shiniest vehicles from OEMs, and transit fleet management. I hope you enjoy hearing from them. Please note, we will save Q&A for the end. April, did I miss anything?
That sounds great.
Excellent. Well, let me introduce you to Dan Chacha. He's senior carbon consultant at Eco Engineers with more than 20 years of experience in clean technology, product management, strategic planning, and business development. He contributes technical and regulatory knowledge to low carbon fuel producers, utilities, municipalities, fleets, and stakeholders planning to participate in carbon regulations, such as California's Low Carb Fuel Standard and the Renewable Fuel Standard, Inflation Reduction Act, and many other programs. He collaborates with clients, providing regulatory guidance in carbon markets, including hydrogen and electrification. Dan?
Thank you very much, Shelley. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I'm excited to take part in this conversation. I would like to kick things off here and getting into the production of hydrogen, because without the production of hydrogen, we are not able to feed the vehicles that need to be fueled up. So I'll talk about hydrogen, and then the rest of our panelists will get into how to use that hydrogen in our economy. A bit about Eco Engineers to start off here. Shelley had a great overview of what we do. We're a consulting firm focused on the transition to a low carbon economy. And we address project development to produce low carbon fuels, as well as decarbonizing all sorts of areas of our economy, including products and services. So we work in the greenhouse gas accounting space. We are kind of separated into three business units: Eco Consulting, Eco Auditing, and Eco University. We engage with customers on the educational front through our Eco University segment. Eco Consulting to support project development and due diligence of new projects being created, and our audit team to verify and help guide clients through the regulatory process in order to really capture all the revenue that's possible with these low carbon fuel programs. So with hydrogen, we'll start off just by addressing the question of why hydrogen. Why do we want to move to hydrogen, or why are we thinking of that in fleets? Hydrogen has a number of advantages over traditional fossil fuels. One of the big motivators for moving to hydrogen is the push to move all transportation to zero emission fuel sources. Today, electric vehicles and hydrogen vehicles do fit that profile of a zero emission fuel source. So that those two fuel sources really are available to meet some of the goals that are being set out by states and regions around the world to move to zero emissions in the coming years, some of them as early as 2030 or 2035 for decarbonizing our fleets. But in addition to the environmental profile of having zero tailpipe emissions from a hydrogen vehicle, they are a very high efficiency type of vehicle, and it's a high efficiency type of fuel source. So if you compare, this graphic shows the comparison of an equivalent amount of energy from hydrogen versus an equivalent amount of energy for gasoline, and the hydrogen can propel that vehicle for more than twice as far as the gasoline vehicle. That's due to the high efficiency of a hydrogen fuel cell and able to convert that to propel in motion. Also, hydrogen vehicles are essentially an electric vehicle. So once the hydrogen converts to electricity, it is just turning an electric motor. They're very quiet, very smooth rides. And one of the biggest advantages of hydrogen over competing fuel types is the long range that you can get from hydrogen. You can fit a lot of energy into a fuel tank for hydrogen storage on a vehicle, and it is very fast to refuel that vehicle, similar to filling up at a gas pump. So there are definitely kind of trade-offs between the electric and the hydrogen space, but hydrogen has a lot of potential here for replacing many of our heavy and long distance and medium distance type of applications. Of course, that comes with some trade-offs. Right now, it is expensive to create hydrogen, and there is low production of both the hydrogen and of the vehicles available. Also, there are challenges in terms of how to transport and store the hydrogen that will need to be addressed as this industry grows and gets more mature. All of these drawbacks are being addressed through technical advances and the scaling of vehicle and hydrogen production facilities. So let's take a look at where we are today in the hydrogen market and where things are moving to. As you can see today, the primary, this is an NREL sourced chart, and the primary applications of hydrogen today are really for industrial uses, being used in petroleum refining and ammonia production. And those sources, frankly, how hydrogen is created today is quite dirty in most cases for these applications. 3/4 of the hydrogen being produced today comes from natural gas, that's fossil natural gas. And about 1/4 of hydrogen today is produced from coal in a process called coal reforming. So we want to look ahead at both the use of hydrogen and how it can be used as a clean vehicle source, but also how it's produced, because that's very important to solving the problems of climate change and emissions. So moving forward at the expected demand for hydrogen, the medium and heavy duty market is looking, will be the dominant consumer of hydrogen, as well as decarbonizing our natural gas pipeline by blending hydrogen into natural gas. But I'm using words like decarbonizing. How is hydrogen going to decarbonize these applications if they're made from very dirty sources today? That takes us to the topic of how do you measure the environmental footprint of this fuel and the production of this fuel. We know that using it is very clean, but how do we produce it in a clean way? You would first need to measure what that impact is of the hydrogen. This is a process called a life cycle assessment or life cycle analysis, or LCA for short. And essentially what an LCA does is it looks at all of the inputs to creating in this example, to creating a fuel. So what are those inputs of feedstocks? How are those feedstocks acquired? Are they grown? Are they harvested? Are they mined? How are they transported to a production facility where they get converted to the end fuel, which in this case is hydrogen? And possibly are those byproducts being produced, and can those fuels be used within the system to clean up the actual production itself? So all of this is kind of within the boundary of what we would look at doing a life cycle assessment of producing hydrogen or any other fuel that needs to be measured. And at the end of the day, what we look at is to determine, in terms of greenhouse gas and climate change, we want to see what the carbon emissions or the CI emissions of that fuel is on a per unit of energy. So we're measuring how much emissions are emitted to produce a certain amount of energy in this process. Hydrogen today has kind of a high CI or a high carbon emitted model, medium or medium to low model, and then a very low carbon intensity model. So that's where this concept of life cycle assessments really becomes important. It would be measuring these production facilities to determine how much carbon is actually emitted during the process of creating hydrogen. The traditional and current method of producing hydrogen is pretty energy and resource intensive. And this is the high carbon intensity model, where you're using typically a lot of energy and applying it to heat up methane and to heat up the methane in order to break the molecules and extract the hydrogen out of it. Methane is typically from fossil natural gas, and it is a process that requires a lot of energy and emits a lot of carbon in the process. So this is not, even though it's prevalent today, it's not the desired way of making hydrogen, and we can look towards improving that carbon intensity. So the second model is to do essentially the same type of process, but to take the emitted any emissions that come off of that process and sequester those. Typically, sequestering means putting it underground in places where they will reside for at least 100 years. The hope here, of course, is that in 100 years, we will have solved climate change and it won't be a factor anymore. So this is a good kind of intermediate step to cleaning the process of making hydrogen, or really of any fuel type, but in this case, we're talking about hydrogen, and sequestering all of those greenhouse gas emissions underground. Though it's a medium carbon intensity, the lowest carbon intensity method available is to use renewable energy. That could be solar or wind, or maybe a renewable natural gas that comes from recycling of organic matter. And taking that energy and essentially producing electricity that applies the process of electrolysis to water, splitting up the H2O molecules of water to create hydrogen and only oxygen as an emission. So that's where we want to move to. That's the nirvana of creating hydrogen that has zero or close to zero emissions in producing the hydrogen. Right now, there's a gap between what's available to do that clean hydrogen production and the demand that we expect to see for hydrogen. So to close that gap, the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed, I guess a year and a half ago now, will address that production by providing some tax incentives for those who are producing the clean hydrogen. So you can see what these incentives look like based on the x-axis here, which is the carbon intensity. Again, we mentioned carbon intensity is derived from that life cycle assessment process. So we at EcoEngineers can support this process of analyzing a production facility to determine the carbon intensity. And if it's low, the lowest bracket here being less than 0.45, this is measured in kilograms of emissions per kilogram of hydrogen. If it's less than 0.45, the maximum incentive, the maximum tax credit is available. And that's 60 cents per kilogram of hydrogen. And it tapers off pretty rapidly after that if you are higher than 0.45 in carbon emissions. So you can see how it tapers off. You can get some incentives up until this 4 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen. The blue line there is a bonus that the IRA provides that basically provides a 5 times multiplier on that incentive program if certain conditions are met by the producer, such as prevailing wages and apprenticeship programs. So very compelling incentives available there. And with the last slide, I'll kind of pull it all together here in terms of showing how this can all be stacked to really provide a financial incentive for creating hydrogen in a clean way across the industry. So this example shows an electrolysis plant that is using renewable energy produced from maybe wind or solar to provide electricity into the electrolysis process and create hydrogen that is used in vehicles. Nationwide, through the Inflation Reduction Act, you would have the 45 credit available for the production of the renewable electricity. You would have the 45V available, which is a production tax credit for low carbon hydrogen that I showed in the previous slide. And those two incentives alone would probably be able to support about half the cost of making that hydrogen. So that it really brings it within sort of a cost parity of kind of our less desirable production methods today. In addition, some states, California is shown here, have additional incentives available. California has an incentive for the gas pump, putting the hydrogen pump, I should say, having the hydrogen pump available, and also through a program called the Low Carbon Fuel Standard to dispense hydrogen in the state. These programs aren't necessarily restricted to California, but they are surely the most aggressive today across the North America, although there are other regions that have programs similar to this. So it is possible to stack all of these incentives and really offset the total cost of production for the cleanest of hydrogen sources. This will hopefully move the industry forward and really make the realization of having plentiful clean hydrogen available for vehicles in the short-term future. Thank you very much. I'll pass it back to Shelley. My contact information is shown there if you would like to reach out and get more information as to how we can help you assess these incentives programs. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate that, going into the details right out of the gate there. Now, let me introduce our next speaker. Annie Lee is a project manager on the Clean Fuels and Infrastructure team at CalSTART. Her efforts are focused on developing zero-emission vehicle commercial corridors developed on the East Coast, specifically I-95. Before CalSTART, Annie was director of Triangle Clean Cities Coalition and principal energy and transportation planner at Central Pines Regional Council in Durham, North Carolina. She assisted in education and workforce development on alternative fuel technologies across the region, including developing an educational partnership with the Southeast Hydrogen Energy Alliance and assisting with North Carolina's National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan. Annie, it's off to you.
Good afternoon. I'm so happy to be with you folks. I do apologize. My camera is not connecting to Zoom, so you're just going to have to hear me and not see me. Thank you, Shelley, so much for that introduction. I am with CalSTART, as Shelley mentioned. For those of you that are unfamiliar, CalSTART is a nonprofit organization, and we're actually a member organization that works in the space between the public and the private sector to knock down barriers to innovation and help drive the transportation sector into a cleaner future. We work in all forms of clean transportation technologies, and I'm here obviously on our corridor sector. CalSTART, though based out of California, is now both nationwide and international. So I'm joining you today actually from North Carolina. So, but onto the I-95 project. The goal of this project is to really create a transformative infrastructure for medium and heavy duty trucking that is both hydrogen refueling and megawatt charging. Next slide, please. This project kicked off in 2023 and should wrap up in 2025. It's a planning project. So what we're actually looking to do is to engage across our industries. So really our trucking technology folks, where the technologies currently are, our community-based organizations, really working closely with our Clean Cities organizations. For those of you that aren't familiar with them, Clean Cities are designated by the Department of Energy to track and advance clean technologies or clean transportation technologies, and then the utility sector. So what we're really going for is to look at what the technology is capable of, what are the power demands by talking with the utilities to figure out exactly where technology and infrastructure or where the infrastructure needs to be built out and plan for that demand load, and then strategically place this fueling and charging infrastructure along the corridors where it will have the deepest impact into a lot of our equity and justice 40 initiatives. So thank you. Next slide. I kind of broke this down already and got a little ahead of myself, but we really want this network to make it so that not only is regional transport a possibility, but so that we can get long haul transportation, and so that our class 7 and 8 vehicles can move seamlessly and decrease the amount of legacy pollution, as well as meet those climate change goals that we have. Again, we really want to bring a consortium of industry, communities, infrastructure experts, meet on those demands and those equity pieces. So then as sites are selected, future funding cycles or other private partners that may be interested in funding and building out are able to do so. Next slide. This project, in case you didn't notice, it goes from New Jersey and down to Atlanta, or down to Georgia, sorry. But the northern portion is kind of left out. And that is because this project is tying in with effort that's being led by the National Grid. Is the East Coast Freight Charging Plan. And so we are working with them to share information to make sure that this corridor doesn't just truncate at New York, but extends and continues all the way to Maine. Next slide. For those of you that are unfamiliar, the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation launched in May the National Zero Emission Freight Corridor Strategy. If you haven't read it, I recommend that you do if it interests you. The first 9 pages are all that you really need to worry about, but it is highly, highly informational as far as getting an idea of where things are looking to go. So with this effort, there are multiple planning projects across the nation, just like ours for I-95, that have been launched and funded back in 2023. But like I said, this just came out 2 months ago. And what this is planning to do is to establish hubs so that those hubs can slowly grow over time. Well, I say slowly over time, but this is all before 2040, to be able to have all of the US corridors, key corridors, have hydrogen fueling and megawatt charging. So to start off in this very first phase 1, they've selected these key corridors and they're looking at focusing on class 4 to 6 trucks, really looking at regional travel, last mile delivery, charging for school buses, service trucks, that sort of thing, which is really essential because the thought process is if we can get little regional hubs established, then it'll be much easier to grow from those spaces. So if you see those little pink red circles, those are there to indicate that the next phase, and actually you can go to the next slide, Shelley, they're looking to go 100 miles out from those first initial nodes. So that the next phase 2, which is what you're looking at here, will have more infrastructure built out there. The initial selection sites were done based off of states that already have policy in place, places where there's already alternative fuel networks established. Also, they see ports as a key area of tying in, or as a great spot for initial adoption of ZEV technologies for medium and heavy duty, because it's already such a close route. It's easier to get fueling in there. It's easier for pilot projects and to establish kind of a best practice. So all of our I-95 corridor is also tying into every port, and we're focused on every port between Georgia and New York, New Jersey port. So all of these are in the first phase and phase 2 level of what's drawn out here in the National Freight Corridor Strategy. Next slide, please. This just goes on to show you how this planned expansion will look. And then this is for 2030 and 2035. Next slide is the corridor as it's planned in its totality. So we've got a lot of inspirational work. Of course, this is not set in stone. Like I said, they plan to update this every year. And, you know, I'm quite sure there will be some iterations along the way and some best practices that wind up evolving. But it's exciting to see this begin its development. Next slide. So with the focus on the fact that the first idea of adoption will be in these hubs, and a lot of them will be focused at ports, I wanted to give some technology examples of what is available off-road and hydrogen vehicles that are at ports. So several of the key things that have been noted about battery electric vehicles, particularly at the ports, is that especially in the Southeast, there is an issue with temperature, particularly high temperatures. It gets rather hot down here and the range does not keep up. The batteries are not as efficient as they ought to be. Also, over the course of the shift, you know, ports are running continuously. Those vehicles really don't get much of a break, and the battery usage drops significantly over the course of a shift. And then you lose your payload over the course of the shift because the battery simply isn't able to operate as quickly and as efficiently as it was able to as it first came off the charger. And then, of course, charge times are also another consideration. A lot of ports will shut down overnight, so they don't have that overnight charging that is accessible, or that may not be as available. Whereas with hydrogen fuel cells, you know, the fuel time is comparable to that of diesel, and what they're already used to working with, that 15 to 20 minutes. There's also a zero loss of power over the course of the shift, so you're not losing that efficiency. And there's a lot less dependence on temperature, or sorry, there's a lot more independence from the temperature, as far as you're not losing efficiency or range because of the fact that it's really hot in the summer, or it's particularly cool in the winter. So next slide, please. One port that I've been particularly impressed with as far as looking at pilot demonstrations is the Port of Los Angeles. So if you're looking at diving into this more, I highly suggest that you go to their website. There are a number of pieces of off-road trucks that are available in this space. However, a lot of them are currently being tested overseas, and I wanted to focus here on a few that were being tested right here in the US. Port of LA happens to be doing a lot of testing. So I wanted to highlight this Nuvera Hyster handler. This is out of the Port of LA. Just want to give you an idea of the size of these shipping containers that are being used, and the length of the day and the temperatures that this thing is being used at. And it has great reviews, as you can see you can go see on their website. Another is this Class 8 yard truck that was built by Capacity Trucks and utilizes Ballard powered systems. Again, I highly encourage you to go. If you're interested in this technology, go check out theirs. Next slide. However, like I mentioned, there is a lot that's going on off-road, out of the country. Palmer has a forklift that's currently being tested in Sweden. I've heard some great reviews about that one. Gaussen has a heavy handling tractor that is currently in testing in France. Volva Construction has a number of different things, but one of to note was the articulated handler that's in Sweden, and that is what you're seeing in this picture here. That's it. Thank you so much. Again, I'm Annie Lee, Project Manager of Commercial Corridor Development with CalSTART. Got my contact information should you want to reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annie. Appreciate that overview of what's existing and what's coming. Next up, we have Dave Schaller, the Industry Engagement Director for the North American Council for Freight Efficiency, which we just refer to as NACFE. His responsibilities include interfacing with fleets and suppliers, writing reports, conducting workshops, giving presentations, and running social media groups. Dave works closely with the drivers, fleets, and sponsors for the Run on Less demonstrations. As a Navistar employee for 27 years, he held positions in product design, research, program management, dealer sales training, marketing, product line management, and strategic product planning, a marketing role that allowed Dave to spend many days in truck stops, fleet offices, and dealerships in 5 countries learning about what the industry actually desired and why. Dave's written several SAE papers, numerous NACV publications, and he holds 5 US patents.
Thanks, Shelley. Hello, everybody. It's exciting to be here with you today, and I'm leading off with the very first slide. I just got back from the Truck World Show a little over a week ago in Toronto, Canada, and I got to take my first ride in that hydrogen truck right there in the photo. So it's living, it's breathing, and it's letting people drive and ride along with it. So it's an exciting time for us. Next slide, please. Its twin sister was inside the show, and I chose to add these slides. It's got the cab tipped on it so that you can see immediately behind the cab are the hydrogen tanks in the vertical wall behind the cab. And then because I'm tall, I was able to lift my phone up over the fuel cell and take a picture of what has replaced the diesel engine. And those are the hydrogen fuel cells. Now, the exciting part to me also is that if you're not aware, Loblaw is a major store chain in Canada. So they're obviously going to be using this truck. Their graphics are already on the door. So it's going into the hands of a real customer to haul freight. Next slide, please. Also at Truck World was the hydrogen fuel cell truck that's been built by Kenworth. Some of you have seen this. I believe they've been running out of the Port of LA. And again, a photo of the underhood of their fuel cell. So 2 different OEMs that had hydrogen fuel cell trucks at a major truck show. So exciting things are happening. I expect a lot more will be seen and announced at the upcoming ACT Expo show. Next slide, please. Why is trucking so interested in hydrogen? Well, that answer is fairly straightforward. The lime green box represents the capabilities of today's battery electric trucks, that they have ranges somewhere around 250 miles and 43,000 pounds. And once you start getting ranges that are much longer or loads that are heavier, you start needing to look for other solutions, which might be hybrids, as shown in yellow. But for much heavier loads seen in Canada, Mexico, or even a little bit in the US, but much longer routes, many drivers can get up to 600, little more than 600. A really great day would be 650 miles. They need to look for a different clean fuel source. Now, that might be renewable natural gas. There are many fleets looking at using renewable diesel right now. But then we get into the hydrogen, both as a hydrogen internal combustion engine as planned by Cummins, and hydrogen fuel cells as planned by Ballard, Cummins, and a whole series of others. So that's all forthcoming, and I'll talk a little more about it, but it's that challenge of weight and range that battery electric can't handle today that really has the industry interested in what can we do with hydrogen. Next slide, please. I frequently get asked when I'm out in public, well, which is going to win? Is it hydrogen or is it battery electric, Dave? And I have to share with you that although much of the world sees them as competitors, I see them as teammates. And when I say that, I mean that both hydrogen fuel cell trucks in the left-hand column and battery electric trucks, they both have rechargeable batteries. They both have electric drive motors. They both have high power cables, software management system, and regen braking. So they have a lot of things in common. What's different is that the easiest way for me to describe to someone a hydrogen fuel cell truck is that if we start with a battery electric truck and remove roughly 75% of those expensive heavy lithium-ion batteries and replace it with a hydrogen fuel cell and hydrogen fuel tanks, we now have a hydrogen fuel cell truck. So as I was thinking about this presentation today, what really dawned on me, for those of you that are terribly interested in hydrogen, all the experience the industry is currently gaining with battery electric trucks is validating many of these components and getting them up to scale, and all of that benefits the hydrogen fuel cell truck development. Now, they both need new refueling system, and they both have large electricity consumption. Actually, the inefficiencies of creating hydrogen and then converting hydrogen back into electricity on board the vehicle, the hydrogen trucks are going to use more electricity than a battery electric truck. Next slide, please. Where are the hydrogen trucks today? Well, the Hyundai pilot is at the Port of Oakland, and I'm going to touch more on this in a bit. But I was just up in Canada, and there's a lot of excitement around hydrogen up there. Nikola is working on their first commercial hydrogen fueling station in Alberta, and working with Suncor to make all that possible. Probably the one that's gotten the most social media and press recently is Biagi Brothers. We worked with Biagi Brothers on a battery electric truck demonstration in 2021. And they decided they'd really need more range than what they could get out of their battery electric heavy duty trucks. So they're now out testing hydrogen trucks. So they're familiar with battery electric, and they're making the next move to hydrogen. Next slide, please. What's really exciting, at least to me, is that we've just had opening of First Element Fuels Port of Oakland fueling facility. So this new facility is servicing 30 Hyundai Accent trucks, plus some of the Nikola trucks, like the one from, I can't read the small print, but there's a carrier that's moving intermodal containers with them with Nikola trucks. So this just opened. So now we have real world hydrogen trucks and a real world fueling station. These are all steps forward. Keep in mind, we're at a very, very early stage of this. Battery electric trucks have been around for five to almost 10 years in some cases. So we're catching up and building off of what's been done with battery electric trucks and now extending it further with hydrogen. Next slide, please. We look at what's being done in the US and Canada of particular interest. A couple of really neat slides here you're welcome to reference later, but looking at hydrogen electrolyzer locations and capacities, you'll see the Northeast and the California area very heavily represented. But the $7 billion in hydrogen hubs that recently was announced, we've got Mid-Atlantic, Appalachian, Midwest, Heartland, Pacific Northwest, California, and the Texas area that are all have money being spent to put hydrogen hubs into those areas. Now, one of the challenges I see personally is that hydrogen trucks will probably be operated regionally first, even though much of the industry sees them as the long-haul solution eventually. You'll notice even here, much of the Midwest doesn't have a lot of support for hydrogen. So getting somewhere between, say, Utah and Illinois, there's a lot of open space there to cover. Not that it can't be covered. We can truck hydrogen trailers around for refueling, and that will be done initially. Actually, it's already being done in a few test cases, but it's certainly not the most efficient way of doing it. And Canada has a lot of hydrogen production as well, so there's a lot of excitement up there about the opportunities north of the US border. So there's a lot of things going on, a lot of promise, but we're still early in development. The funds have just been released for the hubs. Personally, as an engineer with a project management background, my own just personal guess is it's probably going to take 2 years of engineering design and development, and probably another 2 to 3 years of tooling, construction, assembly, and whatnot. I don't expect to see these new hubs online for quite a few years yet. So it's exciting, but there's more to come and we need to be patient. Next slide, please. If you're really interested in hydrogen, I would encourage you, NACFE has a free report on hydrogen trucks. Are they long haul's future? And much as I've stated, we see hydrogen and battery electric trucks not as an either or, but an and. Working together, they will support the industry. Hydrogen fuel cell tractors are only zero emission solution for many duty cycles for heavy duty tractors, but there are, as the third bullet point says and my slide showed, renewable natural gas, renewable diesel, and other things that'll help make all that possible. And the trucking industry is still sorting out exactly what type of hydrogen and what pressures are we talking about. Will it be gaseous, liquid? What pressure levels will we fill at? So all of that is to be determined as we move forward. Next slide, please. NACFE is the company, organization, nonprofit that put out the report called The Messy Middle, and you can get it at no cost there by clicking the blue link in the middle. But what we're recommending here is that we know somewhere out in the future, we're going to get to zero emissions vehicles. But here in the messy middle, we're going to be working with a lot of different solutions. As a matter of fact, there's about 20 different alt fuel combinations that are at play in the industry right now. Many people very dedicated to decarbonization, and some of these solutions are much easier for fleets to implement than others. So first steps aren't necessarily going to be a jump right to hydrogen fuel cells. So there's a lot of things at play, and it'll be really interesting to see how the industry plays out as we traverse the messy middle. Next slide, please. I would encourage you to lean on NACFE. We're especially popular on LinkedIn since we tend to be supporting business connections, but you're free to reach out to me at davidschaller@nacfe.org and visit our websites runonless.com and nacfe.org. All of our information is absolutely free to anyone that wants to learn more. Thank you, Shelley, and to the organizations for sponsoring this.
Thank you, Dave. If anyone has not visited the NACFE site, I would really encourage you to do it. Spend a little bit of time going through the reports that are out there. They're particularly focused on freight, but if you're running medium and heavy duty trucks, then there's a lot of information, or medium and heavy duty trucks or transit. There's a lot of information that's still relevant for you as well. So Dave, thanks for joining us today. Next up is RTC of Southern Nevada. Roger Johnson's the Director of Fleet Administration and Technical Equipment for the Regional Transportation Commission of Southern Nevada. He's responsible for managing contracts that operate and maintain the RTC's fixed route and paratransit fleet. His role includes directing and managing bus specifications, quality control programs, and supporting projects that promote the safety, efficiency, and sustainability efforts for the RTC. His experience includes over 22 years of maintenance, and he's been working in public transit since 2011. He serves as a member of the American Public Transportation Association's Zero Emission Fleet Committee, has contributed to the development of APTA's standard bus procurement guidelines, and is a member of Zero Emission Bus Resource Alliance. Thanks so much for joining us, Roger.
Thank you, Shelley, for that introduction. Again, just briefly, my name is Roger Johnson. I'm the Director of Fleet and Equipment for the RTC of Southern Nevada. And one of my current projects includes the implementation of our zero emissions rollout plan. And so through this brief presentation, I'd like to share one of our experiences as it relates to hydrogen buses, fuel supply, and how we're using a temporary solution to bridge a gap. A little bit about the RTC first. We are the regional entity that oversees public transit, traffic management, roadway design, and transportation planning. Our fleet consists of over 400 fixed route vehicles and 400 paratransit vehicles. Our fixed route operates on 39 different routes. We provide over 40 million trips a year. We travel over 20 million miles a year, and we cover an area of almost 400 square miles. Next slide, please. Our current fleet is comprised of about 88% compressed natural gas. And some of the advantages that gives us is the ability to fuel buses in 15 minutes or less, which supports our demanding operational needs, and operating upwards of 350 miles, and the buses perform really well in the heat. Next slide, please. In 2020, we developed a zero emissions bus rollout plan that identifies a pathway to become 100% zero emissions by the year 2050 as funding allows. So we started our transition with a couple of smaller projects that included 2 40-foot hydrogen buses and 4 battery electric buses. We're evaluating both of these technologies in our fleet for the consideration of their flexibility, resiliency, and their performance to better understand what our best path forward of how we'll meet our operational needs. Next slide, please. As we started implementing our first project, we worked with our partners, New Flyer, Ballard Power Systems, and some consultants through KTC Consulting with a Low-No grant in 2020. And that included the purchase of 2 40-foot hydrogen buses, and it also included funding to develop a liquid hydrogen station. And so we knew there could be a challenge with completing the construction of a liquid hydrogen station before buses were scheduled to be delivered. And so just being aware of that as we work through the process of designing a station and developing specifications, And we started experiencing some delays due to revisions to the scope of work and procurement schedules changing. We were able to plan ahead of time. And as a solution to support operating buses when they arrived, we developed a more simple scope of work with an invitation to bid for a temporary supply of hydrogen fuel and dispensing. Next slide, please. So through that process, we awarded a contract to Air Products that resulted in a gaseous fuel supply with no compression equipment that looks like this image here. The fuel station having no compression equipment does reduce the complexity, but it also comes with some unique characteristics that I'll discuss shortly. The station is completely self-contained, meaning it didn't require any instrument air plumbing or power connections from our existing facility. Fortunately, we had plenty of room on the lot to support a convenient location with no worries of any setbacks. The most challenging part was the permit requirements. It wasn't even really challenging. It's just what we thought was going to be a long queue time for a building or a construction permit wasn't really needed because this is all self-contained. We only needed an operational permit from the fire department. And so what you're looking at that we consider the fuel station are the two white trailers surrounded by the Jersey barriers. And you can see our bus pulling up on the left next to a trailer that Air Products calls HF-150, representing the 150 kilograms that it can store. And then next to it is a CT-450, representing the 450 kilograms. So these two trailers are plumbed together through a stanchion assembly at the rear. Next slide, please. Here's a closer look at the HF-150 trailer. Now, the main intent of the smaller trailer is to provide the dispenser assembly and the controls. So there isn't really a storage of fuel that we're using from this trailer. It acts as more of a pass-through, and it's just there for interfacing to the bus. The taller trailer that's behind this one provides the volume of storage. So this small trailer stays on our property all the time, and it includes all the required signage, leak detection, alarms, and emergency shutdowns. Next slide, please. This is a view of the stanchion assembly that plumbs the smaller trailer to the larger trailer. It's bolted to the ground and it's equipped with pressure gauges, a regulator, and a vent stack. So as the storage and the larger trailer becomes depleted from using the fuel, this plumbing can easily be disconnected for a new trailer to be exchanged. Next slide, please. This is what the controls and the dispenser looks like on the trailer. The control panel requires very little power. It's done with only a 12-volt battery and a solar charger that are both incorporated into the trailer. The fueling process is really straightforward, and it's similar to our CNG fueling process. After powering the control unit on, it prompts you of all the required steps, including grounding the vehicle. It auto reads the pressures, and it records the transaction. The amount of time that process takes can vary depending on how much fuel is in the trailer and in the bus, but typically it's about 30 to 40 minutes. We are expecting hydrogen fueling time to match our CNG fueling when we have the full build out of our liquid station. Next slide, please. So as the fuel station assembly was completed, we performed training with the manufacturer, Air Products, to educate and inform the fueling staff, the maintenance team, safety and security, and we even invited the fire department just to have them comfortable. In addition to training for the fuel equipment, we also perform specialized training from the bus manufacturer, New Flyer, and Ballard, the fuel cell manufacturer. Some of that training we even perform before the buses arrive so that maintenance feels comfortable, and we're continually performing training to this day. We're also talking with a local community college to help develop curriculum and programs to help introduce these new technologies to the future workforce. Next slide, please. Now to speak to some of the challenges, it has been difficult to record the transactions in a format that is familiar to us. We found the control panel on the trailer displays the transaction in megapascals, and we're trying to track everything in kilograms dispensed. And although there is a display for kilograms, we find it's not always accurate, and we haven't been able to use it consistently. So that leaves us having to rely entirely on the bus telematics reports for fuel economy, and we don't really have an easy way to make a validation against that. Also, we have to manually update our maintenance software with the mileage at the time of the fuel transactions because we don't have Fleet Watch, which is our fuel management system integrated with the trailer. The other challenge I'd like to point out is a bit of an operational challenge. So due to the inherent design of the trailer, it fills on equalizing pressures only without any compression equipment on board. We don't get consistent fill levels, and we found it challenging to manage assigning the buses regularly to the same routes. So for example, when you have a newly delivered trailer, we can achieve almost a 90% fill and dispatch at the blocks that operate 200 miles very easily. But as the trailer continues to get used, we would get to a point where we can only fill the bus to 50%, and then we're limited to operating blocks that are closer to the 80-mile range. So we've been working through that and identifying routes we can dispatch to based on varying levels of station pressure. And we've also been trying to identify the best time to reorder trailer replacements. We don't want to order every 2 days, but we also don't want to wait so long that we can't dispatch buses because of low fuel. So it is getting easier with continued experience, but it's a learning curve with using this type of solution. Next slide, please. For a brief look forward, we are continuing with the construction of our liquid hydrogen station that's going to support up to 15 buses. That should be completed by the end of this year, the beginning of 2025 maybe. And we have 22 more 60-foot hydrogen buses on order with New Flyer, 7 of them for delivery at the end of this year, and then 15 more the following year. And we're also working with our engineering team to design a second phase of liquid hydrogen fueling infrastructure that will support up to 50 buses. And we're working on a scope of work for the supply of liquid hydrogen fuel. Next slide, please. And so in summary, I would say that while we didn't plan on using this temporary gas solution as we move forward and recognize there was going to be that gap in timing of our liquid station and bus arrival, this was a great solution to support our first 2 buses. And although there is a bit of a manual process and some inconsistency with how much you can fuel a bus, it has allowed us the ability to put buses in service and gain operational experience and perform training. And so that's all I have prepared to share, and I look forward to any questions at the end. Back to you, Shelley.
Thanks, Roger. Really appreciate you sharing your lessons learned and the growing pains as well as the advantages of going with hydrogen in your new fleet. Next up, we are heading back to California. Roland Cadero is Foothill Transit's Director of Maintenance and Vehicle Technology. He's responsible for procuring, deploying, and ensuring the maintenance of transit vehicles and all related technology. Roland has 21 years of experience working in the transit industry in varying capacities from finance, operations, facilities, and fleet maintenance. He's been involved in the deployment of Foothill Transit's electric bus project and full electrification initiative since 2010, a proud alumnus of the Leadership APTA Executive Development Program and Eno Transit Senior Executive Program. He also earned a certificate in FTA Environmental and Sustainability Management from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. And now he's going to talk to us more about what they're doing with hydrogen in their fleet. Roland?
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks for inviting us this webinar to share our experience with our zero emissions program. Just a little bit about Foothill Transit. Foothill Transit is a joint powers authority that's governed by the 22 cities in the San Gabriel Valley and Pomona Valley area, which is located in the eastern portion of LA County. We're about 40 miles east of Los Angeles or downtown LA. We cover 327 square miles of a service area, serving a population of 1.5 million people. Our current boardings is 12.6 million boardings per year. We're still trying to increase that boarding. With COVID, we were impacted heavily in terms of our ridership from about 50 million per year to 12.6. We're starting to grow that ridership again, and we're slowly getting back to our normal annual ridership. We have 36 local and express routes serving a community area, a bedroom community. So we have an express route that travels from the city of Montclair, which is the furthest Los Angeles County community, all the way to downtown LA. current fleet comprises of 307 compressed natural gas buses, 19 battery electric buses, which includes 2 double-deck battery electric bus, and 33 hydrogen fuel cell buses, which we acquired a couple of years ago. We've been running it in service since June of 2 years ago, and we've been pretty happy with the service that we're able to operate with those fuel cell electric buses. One of the reasons why we stepped forward with zero emissions fleet is because innovation is part of our core mission. And not only that, in 2010, there was a lot of talk about the California Air Resources Board implementing a innovative clean transport regulation that became effective in October of 2019 and requires transit agencies to transition to zero emissions beginning in 2023, wherein 25% of your bus procurement must be zero emissions. In 2026, 50% must be zero emissions. By 2029, 100% of your bus procurement must be zero emissions, and then meeting the goal of 100% zero emissions fleet by 2040. Next slide, please. Our zero emissions program started in 2010, having 14 years of experience operating battery electric bus, mainly Proterra fleet. In 2010, we acquired 3 of those buses. And over the years, from 2014 to 2016 and 17, we added buses along those years, eventually having 33 battery electric buses. We retired half of that fleet after 8 years of operation because of reliability issues and range issues. We acquired 440 kilowatt-hour battery pack buses in 2017. Supposedly have an extended range of up to 251 miles. Over the course of operating them, we realized that we can only operate them up to 150 miles. You're limited to what you can use in terms of the battery energy. You're locked out of 20% of the battery energy so that you don't deplete the energy of the batteries down to zero all the time, and which results in shortening the life of the batteries. Demanding charging requirements in order to extend the range of those buses on some of the routes that we were operating that had over 220 miles of range. We had to install overhead chargers, and those overhead chargers were very costly to implement. And not only would you have to install one overhead charger, you would have to install 2. Mainly because if that overhead charger fails, and if you only had one, you won't be able to extend the range of your fleet. Operational impacts in terms of charging. Some buses will take 3 hours or 4 hours to charge. Depends on the state of charge of the batteries when they come back to the yard. High cost of technology parts. We found during the operations of those buses, we had some inverters that prematurely failed right after the warranty coverage, and those can cost you up to $12,000 to $15,000 to replace. Next slide, please. So during our implementation of our zero emissions program, we first took a look at meeting 100% battery electric by 2030. And in order to meet that, we need to find out how we can meet that program. So we hired a consulting firm, Burns & McDonnell, to help us design a plan. What we found out with their final report in 2019, that it would cost us $120 million to electrify our fleet. Battery electric buses are not a one-to-one replacement with compressed natural gas buses, mainly because of the range limitations. It's more of a 1.5 to 1 replacement. And we would have to increase our fleet from over 300 buses to almost 500 buses in order just to meet the service requirements with implementing battery electric buses. Charging was overnight the bottleneck in terms of overnight charging. You would have to delegate a certain portion of your bus yard where the charger will be installed, and you would have to move buses around as they are being charged out of the charging station, and move buses that need to be charged at the charging station. So it was a ballet of buses moving at night. And then we can only electrify 60% of our bus routes. Next slide, please. Why fuel cell? Simply because with fuel cell, you have that vehicle range of up to 300 miles that we can really operate our fleet with fuel cell buses without having to increase our fleet size. It's more of a one-to-one replacement. In terms of system resiliency, our planning, we interline our routes, meaning to say that we would operate a bus on one route, and once that route is completed, we can operate that bus on another route. With battery electric fleet, you cannot perform that type of a planning approach. Infrastructure cost is a lot cheaper in terms of building a hydrogen fueling station versus having overhead charges with pantograph at your bus facility. The big thing about hydrogen fuel cell bus is the fueling process. Again, with battery electric bus, it takes hours to charge your fleet. With hydrogen buses, fueling only takes a few minutes, which is similar to when you're operating compressed natural gas buses. Next slide, please. How did we start our project with fuel cell? We're not fuel cell experts, and we've never operated fuel cell buses before. So we hired a consulting firm to help us plan our approach into a fuel cell program. Our scope of work included the following items listed before you: developing hydrogen fueling station plan. What size of fueling equipment do we need in order to fuel our buses in our service facility? We looked at the joint use of fueling facility, meaning today we have a public access fueling facility, but we found out that during the analysis that there wasn't really much of a demand in terms of private use for vehicles to fuel their hydrogen fuel cell cars. Help us find appropriate grants to support our project, and all the other items listed before you here. Next slide, please. Required procurement. So first off, obviously, you're going to need a hydrogen fuel cell bus. Instead of issuing a request for proposals for hydrogen fuel cell buses, what we did was we purchased our buses under the California Department of General Services state contract. It's much easier that way to purchase a bus instead of having to go through an entire procurement process that could take almost about a year to award a contract. Design, build, install fueling stations. We issued a request for invitation for bids for a design build of a hydrogen fueling station. We also issued a bid for maintenance facility upgrades in terms of maintaining and operating the hydrogen fueling station. Also provision for a delivery of liquid hydrogen to our facility to fuel our buses. And again, maintenance of our fueling station. The maintenance facility upgrades, by the way, you're not allowed to maintain or repair hydrogen fuel cell bus in your maintenance facility without having to upgrade your gas detection system, detection of hydrogen gas leaks, and evaluating or increasing the capacity of your fan systems, your exhaust fan system in your facility, so that if you have a leak, you can immediately release the gas into the environment. Next slide, please. Again, we started in 2021 when we purchased our first fleet of hydrogen fuel cell buses and the procurement of a hydrogen fueling infrastructure. So all throughout the program, we started our construction in 2022, and we were able to commission the facility and deploy the buses into service June of 2023. Next slide, please. So this is our hydrogen fueling infrastructure. We built at our Pomona bus yard. We have two bus yards, one in Pomona and then another one in Arcadia. The hydrogen fueling station comprises of a 25,000 gallon liquid hydrogen tank, which is equivalent to about 6,600 kilograms of gaseous hydrogen. We elected a delivered hydrogen simply because you can have more volume versus having gaseous hydrogen delivered to your facility. We have two cryogenic pumps, which pumps the liquid hydrogen into the vaporizer towers. It heats up the liquid hydrogen and turns it into gaseous state. And they are delivered into the gaseous storage vessels, what I call the vessels. It comprises of 10 40-kilogram gaseous hydrogen, so it's equivalent to about 400 kilograms of hydrogen that's stored in the vessels. and they are dispensed or pushed back into our dispensers, which is not pictured on this slide right here, where we dispense our hydrogen gas into our fleet. This costs about $6.6 million. If I include the cost of the maintenance facility upgrades, totals about $8 million altogether. This has a capacity to fuel 45, up to 75 hydrogen buses. All we need to do is if we increase our fleet of 33 hydrogen buses to 75, we just need to add a couple of dispensers in our fueling station. Next slide, please. Our hydrogen fuel cell bus upgrade, so the buses were delivered in July. Again, a range of 300 miles, which is comparable to a compressed natural gas bus. The buses have a capacity of 37 kilograms. There's 6 tanks on the rooftop of the bus. Again, they're a 1-to-1 replacement. We had training provided by the OEM, by the manufacturer, which is New Flyer, for bus training, as well as mechanics training in partnership with Ballard. Next slide, please. June of last year, we were able to commission our hydrogen fueling station. Our plan was to fuel 18 buses as fast as we could. So what we were able to do was fueling 18 buses within an hour and 30 minutes. That's 90 minutes of fueling hydrogen buses. The fueling process, the dispenser can fuel up to 5 kilograms a minute, and we average about 9 to 10 minutes of fueling the buses. So just if you were to compare that to a battery electric bus, 18 buses, a battery electric bus, it would take you hours and hours to fuel them. So this was a great process, and we were able to fuel those buses in a fast process. Next slide, please. Up and coming projects, we recently awarded a contract to a consultant again to help us develop a hydrogen fueling station at our Arcadia facility. We recently signed a contract with New Flyer for 19 additional hydrogen fuel cell buses. We still see a possibility of operating battery electric buses. That's why we recently purchased 12 double-deck battery electric buses with Alexander Dennis. These are Buy America compliant buses with a range of 300 miles. The proposed plan is to develop a battery electric bus with 700 kilowatts of energy capacity. So we're looking forward to these new projects as we move forward with our transition plan to 100% zero emissions fleet. Next slide, please. I think that concludes my presentation. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And now I'm going to open the floor for Q&A. I saw that there were some that came through the Q&A box and some that came through chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in Q&A. And Annie, if it's okay, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Sure. The first question that I'm seeing is for Roger. How much funding have you received from EPA, DOE, the feds, and tax credits?
So I can't answer that in total. I know for this particular project that I presented on, it was 3.8. It was federal money, and we don't have any tax incentives or credits for hydrogen fuel at this time, only for our natural gas and RNG.
Okay. Does anyone else want to bounce off of that or have anything to add? All right.
I do. For our hydrogen buses, they're qualified to receive the HVIP funding. And we get about $240,000 for our 33 buses. We received additional incentive funding from CARB of $260,000 per bus. So that's a big contribution to lower the cost for the transit agency to purchase hydrogen fuel cell buses.
Thank you. Next question, is the power to weight ratio similar to conventional power plants?
Power to weight ratio, I don't know that I could answer specifically. I think that the hydrogen power plant and the electric power plant are much more torquey. It's definitely better acceleration than our traditional power plant, and the weight ratio compared to a traditional CNG bus is within 500 pounds, probably, the gross vehicle weight rating.
Very good. I'm not seeing. I think I'm missing some. Aha. Sorry, I'm finding where all the questions are. Has there been any cost analysis study done comparing on-site hydrogen gas production versus truck to site?
I don't have any cost analysis to share, but we are working with some clients who are doing on-site using dairy cow manure to electricity to electrolysis for local transit buses, hydrogen transit buses. So great story there. Everything's local, including the feedstocks, and you could do the same with wastewater treatment plants or landfills. You could use that gas to convert to hydrogen. So there are opportunities for doing that. I can't answer the question directly in terms of how the costs compare, though.
There. All right, we're going to pop over to Roger. This one's for you. How has your workforce training been funded and developed? Was that part of the Lono grant? Did you develop training on your own or with support?
Yeah, great question. So with our initial project of those 2 buses and the fueling infrastructure, we included specific hours for training from the bus manufacturer and the OEMs who provide the fuel cell and some of the subcomponents. We traditionally do include training in our bus procurement contracts. In addition to that, I think starting in 2022, the Lono grants and such are requiring 5% of your award to go to workforce development. So moving forward, it will be a constant 5% moving forward.
Roland, we've got a question here for you, and I'm actually curious too. Why not have on-site hydrogen production for your buses?
You know, I've been asked that question several times in the past. So there's several reasons. First off, we're a transit agency. We need to focus on providing service to our customers. Hydrogen production requires a larger footprint than having the infrastructure that we have for delivered hydrogen. We don't have that capability or the capacity in our bus yards for a larger facility. Third of all, I mean, if you're a manufacturer of hydrogen, you obviously, you have to invest in capital, right? In terms of building the equipment and the process to produce hydrogen. There's a huge capital investment in terms of that. And then you have to maintain that equipment. Third off, you have to have the technical expertise. So you have additional personnel that we don't have at this moment to operate such a facility. And if you're looking at hydrogen production, you're either looking at an electrolyzer or a steam methane reformer. Electrolyzer requires a huge amount of water to create hydrogen, and that needs to be filtered. Steam methane reformer, you have to use a lot of gas, and that's not as carbon intensive or carbon friendly as electrolyzer. So all those efforts that you put into this, I think if you're only generating or using about 400 kilograms of hydrogen on a daily basis, the cost in terms of, you take all into consideration, the cost of the capital investments, the maintenance, the electricity, the amount of water you need, it's going to cost us more per kilogram than what we're paying versus delivered hydrogen. Right now, we're paying $9.12 per kilogram for delivered hydrogen. That's a lot lower than what other agencies are paying for. I would assume that if we were to manufacture our own, it would probably cost us maybe up to $30 to $40 or even $50 per kilogram because of all the investments that we have to put in. Lastly, if that equipment fails, then I don't have any other recourse in terms of having hydrogen to fuel my buses. With me having a contract for delivered hydrogen, I know that I would have consistent delivery on a required basis to fuel my buses. If the provider has an issue with their equipment in terms of manufacturing hydrogen, they have other sources where they can pull out their resources to deliver hydrogen. So I gave you a huge answer to that question. I hope I was able to answer that appropriately and kind of gave you an idea of why we're having delivered hydrogen versus on-site production.
Roland, that helps a lot. I hadn't thought about the fact of, if your site goes down, then you can't fuel your equipment, and then who's your backup? That
Right.
makes a lot of sense.
Because
Um,
if you're a manufacturer, if you're an industrial manufacturer of hydrogen, you can always get back your cost of the equipment to produce, and you can put profit into it. But for us, it's not, we don't have the capability.
Dave, this might be a question more for you. Does altitude affect range or performance? Or has anyone had any experience with
I can't answer that for hydrogen.
I have no idea. Does anyone else know?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Ross, I mean, down in LA, I mean, it's pretty, we have hills and stuff, but we're not operating the buses at 12,000 feet or 12,000 feet. But in terms of hydrogen, I don't know if it will affect the performance, but probably not.
My assumption, also just an assumption, but I would think it would not be very impactful, just based on some of the conferences that we attend and we talk about efficiencies per kilogram that we hear different agencies getting, and it always seems to be pretty close to the same. No huge swings to it. That's the only other perspective I could add.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, Roland again. How are the maintenance costs for hydrogen fuel buses compared to that of the electric buses?
Well, as was mentioned during the presentation by Daniel and Dave, I mean, a fuel cell bus and an electric bus, they're both electric buses. And the only difference between the two is one is the batteries are charged over the grid, and the other one is the batteries are charged using hydrogen to create electricity to charge the batteries. So in that sense, it's pretty much almost the same in terms of maintenance cost. It's a lot cheaper than maintaining a internal combustion engine. You don't have filters, oil. You don't have consumable materials that you have to replace when you're doing your preventive maintenance. So we see that the maintenance of hydrogen fuel cell buses is basically comparable to a battery electric bus. But however, in terms of as we look to the future, in terms of after 6 years or 300,000 miles of operating fuel cell buses, I foresee that it's probably going to be cheaper to maintain or do a midlife on a fuel cell bus. You have a smaller battery pack on a fuel cell bus versus a battery electric bus, and the cost of replacing those batteries are pretty expensive. And in terms of the fuel cell stack itself, the fuel cells are made out of carbon and they could be renewed. They can be reused. I've heard that replacing those fuel cell stacks on a hydrogen fuel cell be around $30,000 to $20,000 versus maybe a couple of $100,000 in replacing batteries in a battery electric bus, where the state of charge has gone down to 70% and they're almost pretty much dead. So I don't know how long those batteries are going to last on a full battery electric bus. There's been talk that 6 years, maybe 8 years. So midlife, you would have to look at probably replacing those batteries after 500,000 miles or 6 years in operation, or 300,000 miles, may I say.
Great point. This was touched on some in the presentations, but in case you want to expand upon your answer, why did you select hydrogen buses instead of CNG?
So, I mean, we run multiple fuel sources. Why hydrogen over electric, full battery electric is, it's just better suited for operational requirements based on the quick fuel time, based on the extended range they can provide. But natural gas is very much obviously a very big part of our fleet moving forward, but still emits a small amount of emissions. So as we look to transition to zero emissions, it's hydrogen fuel cell or battery electric, and obviously testing both of them still, but interested in very much in hydrogen because it seems better suited for transit operations.
I want to add also, why do you select hydrogen bus instead of CNG? Under the California Air Resources Board Innovative Clean Transport regulation, there are only two technologies that are considered zero emissions, that's battery electric and fuel cell. As you are required to transition to 100% zero emissions here in California, the CNG is not one of your choices. So it's either battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell bus.
Thank you. We just had another question pop up. As NIO reportedly begins production on semi-solid state powered light duty vehicles, interested in the panel's thoughts on whether this development could shift the picture on what technology wins in the medium heavy duty space.
I can take a pass at that. I certainly think it's too early to predict a winner there. Solid state does have a lot of promise in reducing the weight of batteries and cost, and increasing that storage density. But you still have a lot of, you still have the similar problems with range and payload as you do now. It will improve. I think they'll kind of move into each other's segment a little bit more, but it will be very sort of application specific, and exactly where those costs come to on the two technologies will be a big impact. So I don't know if there's a clear winner. I think I really like how Dave kind of presented the different technologies as being partners to each other, as opposed to looking at one sort of edging the other out.
I guess from my aspect, I would reference back to the slides where I had the different colored boxes showing the limits of battery electric. Over time, as battery technology changes, regardless of what it is, there are a lot of professors and venture capitalists and companies working very hard to create better batteries for all transportation systems. As it improves, that battery box is just going to get larger. How large do you get and how fast it'll get there? If we knew that answer, we'd be getting wealthy in the stock market.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you all for your time. I know that there's one or two questions that we weren't able to get to, but I would like to thank all of our panelists, thank NAFA for hosting us, and again, our sponsors for supporting us financially in this program. April will be sending out a survey from NAFA. These webinars are meant to provide updates and education for you, so I hope you'll take a few minutes to complete the survey when you receive it. And then lastly, a final plug for the Sustainable Fleet Technology Conference and Expo for those that may have joined late and missed it at the kickoff. Please check out sustainablefleetexpo.com to find out more about the great learning, networking, and exhibitor showcase happening in Durham, August 13th through 15th. Thanks, everyone, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
But